Howdy, folks. It's Nakia here. Come on in. We're not behind. It's just now 9 o'clock, but we're talking about moving to a new city tonight and what that looks like. So come on in. We'll give folks another minute or so to get on, probably about another 30 seconds, and then we will get started. We're going to be exploring moving to a new city from a financial point of view, from a mental point of view, and from a emotional point of view, right? And I'm going to give you some tips on how to do that. I'm going to give you some ideas on what you should be focusing on and the reasons why you may be looking to relocate to a new city. So we're going to talk about all of that. Hey, Candy, welcome to Money Monday. Okay, what did I say? A couple minutes. Okay, we can get started. Okay, so there's a such thing as relocation astrology. And if you don't believe in astrology, that's fine. That's not the point of the conversation. The point of the conversation is different places affect you differently. That's why you feel so good when you go to certain cities, when you visit, when you're on vacation. And it's because basically changing your geolocation can change your perspective, right? A different place can transform you. It can help you with personal growth. It can help you get a new perspective. It can shift your energy. And so these are all things that you can do if you're feeling stuck personally, professionally, financially, romantically. If you just feel like, you've been stuck in this place, you can't move past a certain point, relocating to a new city may be the thing that you need, right? So let's talk about it. Now, like I said earlier, when you are thinking about moving to a new city, there are a couple things that you need to focus on. Money, first of all, because you're going to need money. You have to really think about your mental and your emotional state, and then you have to think about your lifestyle. Okay, so let's talk about the money first, of course. Anytime that you're going to be moving to a new city, it's going to cost something, even if your job is relocating you. And we'll talk about that later on in a few minutes. But you should have anywhere between $3,000 to $10,000 to help you move, right? We're talking about whether you are driving your U-Haul, maybe you're using a pod, maybe you're hiring a moving company to move you. It's going to cost money, right? And so you have to think about that. Where are you going to live when you get to that new city? Typically, if you're buying a home or you're renting a space, you're going to have deposits, you're going to have money that's due, you're going to have down payments, maybe for electricity, if you're new, electricity or utilities. If you're new to the city, are you going to sell all your furniture and buy more furniture when you get there? That's all going to cost money, right? And then in addition to that, you want to have some money saved just in case. So you'll have the money that it takes for you to move, whether you're renting a moving truck or you need moving supplies, so on and so forth. And then you want to have some money in your savings. Now, before we skip to the savings, let's talk about what I did when I moved to Dallas. So I'm originally from Missouri and from St. Louis, and we moved to Dallas in 2018. And we saved about $5,100, and that was right around what we needed. That was the perfect amount for us. We had about $4,200 in fees. So after everything was said and done, we had about $950 left over from our moving fund. Okay, now that's in addition to what we had in our savings. That money that was spent, it went for our apartment, our first month rent, and our deposit. Our U-Haul, because we moved ourselves, was about $1,000. Gas was about $250. So you can see it's adding up. Even moving boxes and tape, that stuff is going to add up. So you really have to consider what is going to be the cost for you to move. Okay. Now, in your savings account, of course, you don't want to move with a zero savings balance. So you ideally want to have at least 3 months worth of your expenses saved. The more money you have, the better. If your job is relocating you, that's good because they're going to cover a bulk of your relocation costs, but you still want to have something just in case because anything can happen, right? What if you move to a new city and God forbid, you get in a car accident? You're going to need a way to figure that out. So you definitely want to have some money socked away, at least 3 months of expenses, a few $1,000s to help you as a cushion just in case when you get there. The next thing that you want to do is create your checklist. So your checklist is going to help you figure out the groundwork. So before you even start packing your boxes, before you even start figuring out what city that you want to move to, you need to have a checklist. That checklist should include things that you want to research, right? So where are you going to live? Where are you going to work? You're going to think about your lifestyle, which we'll talk about in a second. You want to think about cost of living for that city, right? You're trying to figure out if I move to this city, what does that look like for me financially, right? There are things that you need to know about the city that a lot of people don't know. Like, for example, a lot of people move to Houston, but Houston has a flooding problem where they flood yearly. Parts of the city flood every single year. And it's because they have an issue with the infrastructure. Those are things that you need to be aware of before you move so that you can be prepared financially. Okay. And so after you do that, you want to set your moving budget. So you want to say, okay, I've done my research, I've done my due diligence, I know how much it's going to take me to move. I've, got on moving companies' websites, I've gotten quotes, I figured out how much gas it's going to take. I've done my due diligence. What does my moving budget look like? Right. So like I said, we knew based on our research that we were going to need $5,000. So that's a good way for you to determine, okay, how much am I really going to need? And then it's going to help with your planning. Okay, so you want to figure out absolutely what that looks like for you financially moving, and then what that looks like for the next 6 to 12 months. I saw an unfortunate story a few months ago where a young lady moved. I think she moved from Florida to Houston with her children, and within like 4 months, she was living in a shelter because she did not plan properly. You need to know how much money it's going to cost for you to live, for you to survive in this new city. Okay. And you do that by figuring out the money, the moving costs, the savings, and all of that. The next thing that you need to consider when you're moving to a new city is your emotional state and your mental state. It's very difficult, it's very stressful, it's high anxiety. And so you need to be prepared for that as you're moving because that's something that I don't think a lot of people anticipate, especially those feelings can be heightened, especially if you are moving by yourself, right? Where it's only you. And this is what we see a lot with college students, where they move and they're so homesick, they did not prepare mentally, they did not prepare emotionally, and now they're ready to come back home because they've never lived away from their family, they've never moved before, they probably have never lived on their own, and now they're ready to come back. You're going to have some of those same emotions. It may be lonely depending on where you move. When my husband and I moved to Dallas, we didn't have family here, and so it was just us, right? Luckily, well, not luckily, but about a year and a half into us moving to Dallas, the pandemic hit, right? And so nobody could really go anywhere anyway, and so that helped a little for me, not so much for him, but you have to think about those feelings of being lonely, that doubt, that fear that's going to creep up because it is going to come if you're moving to a city that you've never lived in before. You have to think about the different cultures when you're moving. Every place is not the same. Every place um, doesn't have the same culture. They don't have the same vibe. You need to think about the area that you're moving because that's going to impact your mental health and your emotional health. Okay. Um, you need a plan. Like I said earlier, plan. You can literally Google a moving checklist. You can Google how to relocate to a new city. You can Google anything that you want to Google, but you need to have your plan in place so that you know what that looks like, where you're going to live, what you're going to do, so that you have a game plan. Of course, if you're moving to a city where you have family, where you have contacts, where you have friends, or whatever you're moving for a job, it's going to be a little easier because you're going to have somebody to cushion your move, but you absolutely need a plan. And then as you're working on your mental and your emotional state, you also need to be doing your self work, right? So working on fixing those traumas and those childhood things that you went through, working on who you're going to be, right? Deciding who you're going to be. I don't know what it is, but it's something about moving to a new city where you can basically reinvent yourself. You can be anybody that you want to be, not in terms of being a fraud, but just figuring out, I don't want to be negative anymore, right? I want to be more positive. I want to be fun to be around. I want to be more outgoing. I want to be more respectful of people, whatever it is, right? You can decide who you want to be and then working on your self esteem. We talk about self-esteem, right? And I think that a lot of people think that self-esteem is just letting people treat them poorly. But how you think about yourself, how you talk to yourself, how you treat yourself, the kind of boundaries you set, those are all connected to your self-esteem. And believe it or not, that impacts your mental health and your emotional health. And so you really have to be clear in on who you are and what your beliefs are, so on and so forth, so that as you move to a new city, it won't break you mentally. Okay. And then you have to think about your lifestyle. So, what do you like to do, right? If you like to go to parks and hike and do that sort of thing, moving to a concrete jungle like New York may not be a good idea, right? You have to think about networking because you're moving to a new city, you may not know people, right? What are the job opportunities looking like? Or are the jobs plentiful? Is there a lot of opportunity? What is the cost of living? There's a big difference between moving from Memphis, Tennessee to Los Angeles. Okay. It's a big difference financially, it's a big difference in the cost of living, it's a big difference culturally. So you have to be prepared for that. What is the diversity in your area looking like? That's very important. What are the race relations looking like? I know we like to pretend that racism does not exist. We know it does, right? And so you really have to do your research and know, okay, this is a sundown town. I might not be want to live here, right? Or I might not be want to live within 50 miles or hour and a half in the space, right? Or I know I want to live off the grid, but I don't want to move 2 hours from civilization. Those are things that you should be thinking about in terms of your lifestyle. If you're religious, are there churches in the area that believe what you believe? What's the weather like? What's the nightlife like? What are the activities? What are the politics? Believe it or not, politics impact your day-to-day life, and so you really have to know where you're moving and research where you're moving so that it doesn't really impact your lifestyle too much, right? Once you get the money down packed, once you get the mental and the emotional aspect down pat, you really have to make sure that you're moving to a place that aligns with your values and your lifestyle. All right. Let's talk about tips. Number one, do not. I I'm going to say it. Do not move to a city without visiting that city first. I think a lot of times we romanticize places and we think, oh, Sex in the City. I want to move to New York. And then when you get there and you find out that it stinks and there's rats everywhere, you might decide that you don't want to live there. So absolutely visit the city, read reviews on everything, apartments, communities, get on next door, read some of the things that are going on next door, read reviews on the school district, restaurants in the area, everything. Any place that you're thinking about living, read reviews because those are going to be very insightful as you transition to a different city. If you have kids, you have to think about that, right? The school district, how safe it is. You want to be researching crime. You should be doing that anyway, even if you don't have kids. But I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to live next to rapists. So I searched what the crime looked like in the area where I was moving. I searched the sex offender registry because I wanted to know, right? And so those are some things that you should be looking into. I cannot stress this enough. Do your due diligence. Moving to a new city is not a process that you could just say, oh, I'm going to move to Atlanta next month. And then you just pick up and move. Unless you're moving for a job, that's not a good idea. So really do your due diligence. Use the internet to your advantage because it's going to tell you a lot of information. And then six is look at the culture, right? The last thing that you want to do is move to a neighborhood that for 50, 100 years, everybody meets at 10 o'clock and plays loud music and they have a good old time, and you have to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So, really look at the culture of the area, figure out if that's something that aligns and if that's something that meshes with your lifestyle. Six, alone or with a partner. I would not, okay, overall, I do not advise making large or major decisions with a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Um, I just don't. And so you have to really consider that if you move to a different city. We hear, I mean, horror stories all the time about people who move to a new city with their boyfriend or their girlfriend. They were there 3 months and they broke up, right? And now they're paying this high rent and the boyfriend or the girlfriend is gone. So really be careful when you're doing that, making sure that you can stand on your own 2 feet. Are you doing a move for personal or professional reasons? That's going to matter. Sometimes when you're moving for a job, they will give you relocation costs, right? And so that's going to help you with the transition. They will pair you with somebody in that city. They'll help you network. Usually they pair you with like a host family or something like that that'll show you around, that'll help you, make the transition easier. So really consider that as you're weighing your options. Um, you're going to get homesick. When we moved, we moved in August, and between August and December, we went back to St. Louis, I think 3 or 4 times. I think it was three. That was ridiculous, right? Because we were so homesick. So just be prepared for that, because you will be homesick. Don't over fantasize. like I said earlier, we see these movies, we hear about these places. I'm gonna tell you a story in a second, but we hear about these places and we fall in love with them, and we have no idea what it's like. We have no idea what we can expect, any of that. There's a content creator that I follow, and she thought that moving to Costa Rica would solve all her problems. And what she found was she was in Costa Rica and she was miserable, right? And so she ended up, I don't think she was even there a year. She ended up leaving Costa Rica and coming back to the States. So you really have to know what you're getting into before you get into it. And then be prepared to be uncomfortable. That's with anything. Growth, whatever it is, it's probably going to be uncomfortable, right? Because you're doing something new, you're doing something you haven't done before, and so you're going to be uncomfortable. So just be prepared. Focus on the connections. For some reason, distance creates distance, right, in your relationships, and so you have to be intentional with maintaining those friendships, with maintaining those family connections, because it can get real loosey goosey real fast. So just focus on the connections. As I said earlier, make sure you have a moving timeline and a checklist. This process is not something that you could just wake up one day and say that you're going to do. This takes months of planning. Unless you have $1 million in the bank or $100,000 in the bank and you can make a quick choice, you really need to be focusing on your moving timeline and your checklist. The faster you move without planning, the more mistakes you're going to make. As you're transitioning, think about getting a pet or hobby that can help you in your transition. And then, like I said earlier, if you're feeling stuck, right, and it's not working, right? You can't find the job you want to find. You can't really grow as a person. You can't really find a romantic partner. You think you're ugly, whatever it is, just move to a new city. I'm about 90% sure your problems will be fixed. And then, as I said earlier, you need to prep. So prep, plan, then move. And then second from last, put a date on it. So a lot of people, they want to move to a new city. They've been wanting to move to a new city. They wanted to move to Atlanta back in the late 90s, right? And it never happened. Say, okay, by January 1st, I'm going to be moved, right? And then stick to it. And then lastly, I want to leave you with this. Moving to a new city is not for the faint of heart. You can do it. It's not impossible, but I want you to look at it like this. When a flower doesn't bloom, you don't blame the flower, you just change the environment. So, like I said, if you're struggling, if you feel stuck, if you want something different, if you want to grow, all you got to do as the flower is just change your environment and it will get better, more than likely. And if it doesn't work out, worst case scenario, you can just move back or move somewhere else. That's it. Okay. So it's absolutely obtainable. Moving to a new city, like I said, you can do it. For us, it was a process. We took about to everyone else, to the outsiders, it seemed like we moved fast, right? That's because we told them late, but we were actually planning to move for a while and really talking about it and thinking about it. But you can ideally move to a new city in 3 or 6 months. Absolutely. If you get serious, come up with smart money goals, put it on your budget, start planning for it, you absolutely can do it. Okay. That's it. I love you guys. Thanks for joining. If you've been thinking about moving to a new city, start planning. Okay. I will see you guys next week for another Money Monday session.